Episode 21 of the podcast. We're going to talk a little bit about body language and the things that we can feel so that we aren't always trying to watch a face while we groom. And then we're also going to talk about expanding a comfort zone and how that's a part of counter conditioning and desensitization. This is the Creating Great Grooming Dogs podcast. I'm Chrissy Newmeyer-Smith. I'm a certified professional groomer, a certified behavior consultant for canines, and a certified professional dog trainer. And this, my friends and colleagues, is the podcast where grooming and training meet. Body language is kind of a tricky subject for us to talk about on a podcast because certainly we're not viewing the same animal doing the same thing all at the same time. But I do want to talk a little bit about body language because I think that we tend to think that you have to be looking at their face. As humans, we watch faces an awful lot. When we are grooming, we're not watching their face. Even when we're looking at their face, we're still looking at skin and hair, symmetry, what the coat is doing, not usually the expression. But there is a different way to know if our dogs are calm and if they're cooperating, my 3 Cs, comfortable, calm, and cooperative. There's a different way of knowing that without looking at the face. So sometimes I get owners asking me, what is that dog looking at? What's he looking at? He doesn't look happy or stressed. What's going on here? Why isn't he taking treats? Isn't that a sign of stress? He looks like he's staring off into space. And I think that sometimes we assume, especially as trainers, when I'm putting on my trainer hat, we kind of assume that a dog should look happy. But sometimes they don't. Sometimes they're kind of staring off into space. But what it is that dog is thinking about what I'm touching, where I'm working, and what I'm teaching that dog about. I'm going to say he an awful lot just because the he, she thing, like him or her. But I have an example in my head of a particular dog. But he's thinking about what I'm touching and what I am teaching him about in that moment. Now, he can't see what I'm working on because I'm working on an area that if he were to turn around to try to see, his whole body would be kind of twisted, which would interfere with our trimming. So he's instead softly gazing off into space. So you're going to see kind of a soft eye and kind of a stare drifting off into space because they're not thinking about what they are looking at. They're thinking about the feeling that's going on. He's listening to what I'm talking about because I name things while I go, and he's learning. A lot of the time they won't take a treat because what they're doing is they're focusing on this task. So they don't want to be distracted. And I think that it's really important for us to think about, well, how do we feel if we're trying to focus on something and we're thinking about it and someone's like, how about this? How about this? How about this? Even if it's cookies, like somebody giving me chocolate chip cookies, normally I'd be like, thank you for the chocolate chip cookie. But if I'm focusing on something and I'm really trying to focus and I'm trying to learn something, not a great time to keep offering me cookies. And we tend to do that with dogs. So instead of looking at their face and the other types of body language cues, which can be very hard to follow if you're doing a haircut, um, faces only tell part of the story. So as humans, we tend to look at faces first. And we notice things like, if the dog's teeth are showing or their ear carriage, but we aren't always great at interpreting what we see. So instead of worrying a whole lot about what that face is doing and if it's happy or unhappy or relaxed or anxious, when a dog is on the table, we actually don't want a whole lot of super happy, because often that's hard for them to focus when they're super happy. It's not that we want them unhappy. We want them, again, the 3 Cs, comfortable, calm, and cooperative. We want them to be able to handle and focus what we're doing because grooming takes a while. It's not a 2-minute thing. It's not like we work on just nails. I can do most dogs' nails in about 2 minutes. So that's a pretty average nail trim. Grooming takes longer. So we have an endurance run and we can't have like that hyper still that they get when they're happy and they're like, okay, I'm told to be still, and they still down. And they just sit there and they're kind of almost vibrating. They're so still because they're excited about being still because still is pretty fun. Like, we don't want that kind of intensity. We want the 3 C's. We want comfortable, calm, and cooperative. So I want to give you an easy way to know if a dog is comfortable, calm, and cooperative. And there are other ways to read that than the rest of the body language. And especially as a groomer, when we aren't necessarily looking at a dog's face, like we would need an assistant to be able to help with that, right? So I want you to focus instead on the feeling in your hand. Now, when you place a hand on the dog, is the dog stiff or loose? Now, if you cannot get your hand toward the dog without the dog stiffening, then that's where we start. Look for the point where a dog kind of stiffens. And that could be a stiff eye. That could be, but if you have your hands on a dog and you're switching it up to like a brush or something else, a new tool, you have your hand on that dog. And when your hand is on that dog, do they feel stiff or loose? If you press gently, does that dog move into your hand, or is it like pressing on a wall? Does the dog push back when you press? Like, is the dog really kind of actively bouncy when you press and they push back? But just a gentle press, because a dog who is being calm and relaxed for you will kind of just gently sway with a little bit of a press, like they feel soft. And that's something that you can feel no matter what tools you're using, whatever tools you're holding. And I want you to think too that that's one way to detect if a dog's mood is okay, right? Like if they're still being able to relax. So, having your hand on there and thinking about, okay, I'm going to hold you and touch you, and are you being good? Can you handle this? Are you loose? So bam, right there, without having to look at their face, without having to read the whole body language, a dog who pushes and softens into your touch is calm. Right? They may change and not be calm in a minute, but in that moment, they're calm because a loose body is not a stressed body. It's very difficult to be stressed out and loose at the same time. That's a really hard task. In fact, try it with me right now, unless you're driving or grooming and you can't right now. I don't know where you listen to your podcast. I'm often grooming or driving when I listen to podcasts. But stiffen your whole body. Tense right up. Like, when we think about when you tense up, like your hands flex, you tighten into fists, things like that. And then try to relax just one hand while keeping your whole body tense. Like as if you were going to pretend, fine, I'll be loose for my left hand while your whole body is tense. It is really hard to do. So if a dog has a paw that's loose in your hand while you're using nail trimmers, or your nail trimmers are lined up on the nail, that dog's whole body is very likely to be loose. Like that's a dog who is not stressed, and that's a dog who is choosing to be loose. Loose is harder than stiff. And I know that's kind of a strange thought. I think that sometimes we're like, what? But it's really much harder to be loose and relaxed. So the kind of things I look for is if I have my hand on a dog's shoulder, let's say for nails. Nails are a great example, and they're kind of such a hot topic right now amongst trainers and amongst groomers. There's lots of stuff about getting dogs to do their nails, right? So if I'm reaching for a dog and I have my hand on their shoulder and I work my way down their leg, if they shift their body weight off of that leg and let me lift it up gently, like with a nice open palm, and I can lift that leg up, that is loose. That's a dog who's choosing to be there with me. If I then hold the toe and open my thumb again, give them a chance to back away if they're uncomfortable. And back away is a small thing. It's not like and I'm going to release and I'm going to run off into the other room because, no. It's very, very small. If they want some wiggle room, I can maybe set the paw down again or calm them down again and reach for the toe again. But it's not entirely disengage, which is what we see an awful lot in dog training. What we want is for a groomer to be able to go, okay, well, let's calm down again. Backtrack to the point that was calm a minute ago, not all the way up at the shoulder. If you got the leg up and you got the foot up and they were calm for that, that's where you backtrack to. And to gently just kind of gauge throughout grooming, is this dog loose? Is this dog yielding to my touch? Is this dog allowing me to reposition them, to move them around, to touch them with things, and able to remain loose? And when you're doing that, sometimes those dogs are staring off into space. They're like looking at something, or maybe they're following what's going on in the room and they're, interested in what's happening around them, but they're not necessarily looking super, super excited or happy. But I think that sometimes we expect like this super, super happy as our gold standard, and I'm not really sure it is. I think it's totally okay for a dog to be just relaxed and up there being chill. In fact, in my opinion, that's what I would rather see. A dog who's up there like, oh, hi. And until I go over and say, you're being so good. And then encourage a little bit of like, yeah, I am being good, And then the tail starts to wag, or half of the body, depending on the dog, Some of those dogs wag their tail starting at their shoulders. But, when you're thinking about grooming, it's something that we are using sharp tools and we need them to be quite still. So to be relaxed, kind of staring into space, and to have a groomer who cannot look at the face and the rest of the body language because we're very focused on our task. But we are also very focused on what our hands are doing. So if we spend time thinking about what it feels like in our hands, we can continuously reassess if this dog is getting stressed or not. Like I said, kind of a different way of looking at it. At least for trainers, they're kind of thinking, well, wait a minute, wouldn't you look at everything else? But if you have your hand on the dog, I want you to think almost like if you close your eyes, can you tell if that dog is relaxing with you or not? Okay, not that groomers should be closing your eyes while you groom, but to have the feel of, is this dog relaxed? So I would like for you guys to kind of give that a try. Even if it's just a matter of you're sitting on the couch with your own dog, it's nighttime, you're watching a movie, and just get a hand on your dog and kind of decide, all right, are they relaxed or not? And not look at them and just kind of get a feel. If you pick up a back foot while they're doing that, or go to lift a tail and notice the tail stiffens, right? Many dogs will do that. They're like, why are you messing with my tail? We're watching a movie, Feel for it, and then feel what you have to do to get them to loosen it again. Is it just a matter of loosening your hand? So it's not always about reading the dog's face. And that's really the point of this segment. It's not about watching the dog's face. We can find out what their body language is through feel. If you're enjoying my podcast, please remember to subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes. How can you work on a training problem when you have a dog on a table and suddenly realize this dog is having a hard time right now? And I find that sometimes people get a little bit overwhelmed. They're like, oh gosh, well, we're going to have to switch into some sort of a training mode, right? Now, if a dog is getting overwhelmed and you decide, all right, I think I'm going to send you to a trainer. Groomers, I totally approve of that. Like, it's okay to stop and say, I'm not sure how to proceed with this. In fact, I think that's a very responsible decision. If you don't know how to proceed, say, I'm going to stop here because your dog's getting stressed or anxious or worried or aggressive. All of those things could be the same. Aggressive could be stressed and anxious, right? But I want you to think about, I want the dog to have as good an experience as possible. So if they're starting to get stressed out, if you do not know how to address it, that is okay to stop. I don't know how to address this problem right now. Or maybe I don't have the patience or the time to address this problem right now. That's okay. Even if it's a shop situation where you're like, I'm going to take this dog off of my table right now, and give it some thought. Put him back up in half an hour if I have a plan, right? For owners, if your dog is getting stressed and you're like, whoa, that just suddenly happened. I'm not sure what to do. But I want you guys to think about, the goal is for the dog to, if they get a little stressed out, we want it to be slow and gentle. We want to help them calm down. And we want to gently, gradually introduce the thing that they thought was scary. So that means, like, if it was the sound of a clipper that turning on, maybe you didn't realize, like, this dog's 7 years old and came in a trim that's grown out, so you thought, oh, it's a new customer to me. But obviously this dog's been trimmed with clippers before. I can tell by the way it's grown out, So you just like casually turn on the clippers like you would with any other dog and find out that they're freaked out by clippers, right? But every once in a while, you just got thrown off. You weren't expecting it, and you have this situation show up. But if you slow it on down and think about, I want you to gradually get used to the thing that you thought was scary. So we start in a place of calm. All right, are you calm at this point? Are you comfortable at this point? And what if I make that sound further away or softer? Now, clippers really, sometimes you have a lower setting that you can use. I usually, even if I'm working with dogs that I've worked with forever, start my clippers up someplace down low. Like I got in the habit of turning my clippers on, like facing the floor and then bringing them up toward the dog so that the sound is a little bit less jarring. But if you lower them or use one of your, little quiet trimmers, the 5-in-1 blades, like, okay, something a little bit softer sounding. But find out what the dog is comfortable with and then slowly build their confidence and their comfort zone around the thing that we have. If you're using treats or toys or things like that, this would be a nice time to use them. I have talked before about how treats aren't necessarily a great idea in a grooming shop environment. So you are not, only accessing treats. But if you do, that's okay. I'm house call, so I can often give treats in between, like, hey, and I'm going to turn on the clippers. And there you go. I like to name the things that I'm doing. So if a dog is worried about something in particular, I'll be like, okay, loud noise. I usually use loud noise for anything that I'm turning on. Sometimes I'll say loud noise, dryer, and hold out the hose for my high velocity dryer so that they kind of look at, oh, right, that's the one that makes the loud noise, but still loud noise. But you can teach loud noise with things that aren't overwhelming. So you want to have something very gradual and always be thinking about what are they comfortable with, and we're expanding their comfort zone. It's not about making them feel okay with something that's scary. It's about teaching them that the thing wasn't scary at all. So I'm going to give you an example of something that where it's gone wrong. So one of my guys, if you're emptying out the grocery bags and stuff and you kind of shake one of them out, he always does this ooh, what was that sound? And my husband will shake the bag look, it's just a bag. And he shakes the bag again, which is overwhelming, right? So this is a long time ago. This doesn't happen anymore, but it was overwhelming. And I'm like, but in his mind, that was look, it's just a bag. And the dog should probably be fine with that. But what it is that what actually happened was that the dog was still stressed. Wait, oh my God, the thing's shaking again. That's that same weird noise. So the way to work on something isn't to do it over and over again at the same intensity. It's to make it less loud, or to make it less velocity on a dryer, turn the dryer down, whatever it is, make it the easiest version and then gradually increase. So when we went back with the plastic bag, as an example, it was oh, hey, do you want to sniff this plastic bag and then make a gentle crinkle sound? Oh, well, that's kind of neat. A gentle crinkle sound. Maybe make a bigger crinkle sound. Once he got the chance to understand, oh, I've sniffed it when it wasn't making crinkle sounds. So in a grooming setting, that could be, oh, they warned me about loud noise, because I like to use lots of words. I'm always talking to these dogs. Loud noise, here it comes, on your shoulder, things like that. But if you work on helping them to be comfortable and then slowly raising difficulty levels, slowly adding volume, or slowly adding a nail grinder to a toe, which can be something if you're not aware of some of the nail grinders and stuff have multiple settings. So I know some of the pet owners are oh, they have one that just has on and off, right? Ideally, you would want something that you can turn down low. But I have started dogs off with the nail grinder off and just worked on how to like kind of hold the lock and file their nail with the nail grinder and get them used to the idea of it on their toe, because that's the easiest version. When they're comfortable with that, build on it and build on it and build on it. Sometimes you don't have to build an awful lot. And I think that that's where trainers kind of come in, where they're like, oh, wouldn't have got this big long plan and we're going to do all these things. But sometimes it's a matter of just spending a couple of extra minutes saying, oh, that made you uncomfortable. Let me slow it on down and show you more specifically what we're doing, and everything's okay. Sometimes you can resolve it in a couple of minutes if it's something brand new that they suddenly were uncomfortable with. And that, my friends and colleagues, if you aren't familiar with training, is kind of the basis of counter conditioning and desensitizing. Because I think that we hear that a lot. We're like, oh, he needs to be counter conditioned and desensitized to clippers or whatever. But that at its core is really what that is that counter conditioning is making them think that something they thought was super scary is not scary or is pleasant, right? To counter condition, to help them be conditioned to, oh, I kind of like it when that turns on. Oh, that doesn't feel so bad. Right? Like, oh, I didn't know that could be pleasant. Not just not scary, but pleasant. As another example, some dogs, once they figure out that, like, oh, brushing when I'm not panicky and when I'm not fighting, when all that stuff isn't happening, brushing feels good. I know a lot of dogs that really like brushing. Brushing feels good. So not only does it become not scary, it has become pleasant. And desensitizing is taking something that they thought was scary and helping them to realize that, like, oh, I don't need to be overly alert to that, right? I don't need to be oversensitive about it. I don't need to be overworked up about it. This is something that we are slow and casual about. So when I think sometimes people hear counter conditioning and desensitization and instantly think, oh my God, I don't have time for that on a grooming table, or owners think I'm going to need a lot of help with this. But sometimes it's something very small. And it's just a matter of patience and breaking it down into its smallest little pieces. You know, holding the grinder with it on, but not necessarily doing any grinding. Holding the grinder with it off and touching it to toes. You know, you think about making all of those little pieces something that they're comfortable with and something that's rewardable. So that reward could be, you know, petting them on the head and telling them they're awesome, which many of our social little creatures really enjoy. But sometimes it doesn't take a lot of time to get them past something that instantly startled them. Maybe it's something brand new they've never ever seen before. For instance, a lot of groomers don't use grinders. So sometimes you get a dog that, you know, is new to you, but has been groomed many, many times before, and you turn on a grinder and that dog's like, what? What is the thing? So sometimes it's just a matter of like, oh, I made an assumption that you would know what that was. I'm sorry. You know, I do it too. You know, I like to think that I don't, but I do. Sometimes I kind of forget, and I've made an assumption like, oh, let me calm you down, and let's just start with that. And by the end of the grooming, you know, maybe you can go ahead and grind those nails because you took a little bit of time to help them be comfortable with it. Now, that doesn't mean you have to do it in one big burst. Sometimes I'll go through and like, oh, let me just teach you about the sound of a grinder. And then we go back to brushing your tail. And then we go back and we use just the grinder next to your nail without the grinder on. And then we go on and you do your ears. And then we go back, because if you're in a grooming situation, you've got a whole bunch of things to do. We can circle back. We can make something small and comfortable, take that comfort zone and expand it out. Think about it almost like blowing a bubble, right? So you get a small bubble and that's your comfort zone, but you add a little bit more air and it's a bigger bubble and a bigger bubble and a bigger bubble, right? So we want that comfort zone to expand. We want them to think, oh, I'm okay with that noise. Oh, I'm okay with the way she has to hold my foot to do it. Oh, I'm okay with this part. It doesn't always have to be super complicated. I think as soon as we add the technical talk to it, sometimes for us that gets a little scary. But if somebody comes along and says, oh, no. All that means is to do this and this and this, right? So I want to make it a little bit more accessible. think about what can help that dog relax. Think about what part of what happened got them scared, and just work on expanding their comfort zone, making them more comfortable with itty bitty gradual changes. And that's really what training can be for you on a grooming table. You don't have to stop everything. You don't have to come up with a 4-month plan. And a dog that needs that should go to a trainer. It shouldn't have to take place on your grooming table. So I know we covered a lot and I went a little bit longer on this podcast, but I had a lot to say this week. So have a great week and stay curious. If you'd like to talk to me, you can find me through my grooming and training business, happycrittersdogtraining.com, my email, chrissy@happycritters.net, and through the Creating Great Grooming Dogs Facebook page. And we have these awesome devices in our pockets that allow us to do live video with each other. I can help you with the dog on your table. We can set up live lessons, and you may be surprised at how much we can get accomplished together via video. I'm also happy to come to you if you're near my area in southern New Hampshire.